Hey everyone. Hope you guys are doing well. By the way, we're at our company retreat this week, so we've got this like beautiful backdrop here in this house that we're staying in.
There's a beautiful mountain out there, but you cannot see it.
Yeah, we closed the blinds so you all wouldn't get blinded out. So we're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. I wanted to give a little bit more time just in case for people to join in. But for you all that haven't talked to me, I'm Will, so I'm our admissions manager. I've talked to a lot of you all on the phone, so I've seen some of you, some familiar names pop through, so you get to actually meet me now in person. This is Maria. I'm going to be giving her a more thorough introduction here in a second. So we've also got Chris, who's our one of our other teammates here. He's participating in the chat. He just said hello. So it'd be great if you all would go ahead and just say hi in the chat. Let me know if my audio is bad. Let us know if you can't hear us. Hey, Morgan.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Oh, wow. I recognize a lot of
people.
names. Yeah.
And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in there, and then we'll try to save some time at the end to go over some questions.
Yeah, so we also looked at the questions you all supplied, and so we took those down. So we're going to try to hit on some of those main points. We've already got several questions laid out that we wanted to hit, and these are just questions that I know come up a lot on calls, and a lot of alumni will tell us that these are kind of common questions or things that students might ask about. So we're going to try to hit those. We're going to try to keep this around 45 minutes, but then if you all do have any extra questions, definitely share them. So, oh, this is cool. Hey, Lee. All right. And by the way, just so you all know, so once the webinar is done, you'll get a link to this so everyone can watch this replay. So if there are any tips or anything that we talk about in here that you want to go back and review, you'll definitely have that. So you can always access that in the future. So when you're in the middle of UX Academy and you want to think about all these efficiency tips, you can come back and watch it. So.
Very international group in here. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started here? So just so you all know, again, we wanted to have this webinar in the first place just to give an extra chance for people to really hear from a student themselves, kind of what the experience of the course was like. We know, it's a big jump changing your career, especially into something that you might have never done before. Design could be new for a lot of our students. And so we wanted to just provide this chance for you to hear again from a graduate, but also we are starting to see kind of a lot more people apply. This spring, the summer tends to be a little bit bigger for us, but we're really starting to see a lot more students come in. And so the anticipation is that there's going to be more questions. So we really want to make sure this is very clear for you all, that you all understand what the course is going to be like. Your expectations are really met there. And also for some of you, I already know that you've put your deposit down, you're ready to get started in April or May or even June. And then for some of the folks, maybe you've applied, you're waiting to hear back, or you're kind of sitting on an invite right now. So hopefully this can answer some last questions for you, and then you'll feel comfortable to go ahead and get your spot saved. And I'll also make this kind of recommendation later on, but in case if you all do have any questions, you want to reach out to me, you can always address me directly in your email, even if it's to hello@Designlab. You can just say, hey, Will, and it'll come to me. So I can definitely help out. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to introduce you all to Maria Jennings.
Hi, everybody.
So Maria's actually on our team. So she works as a UX copywriter. But Maria was also a UX Academy graduate. And so she went through our course. So she now happens to work for us, which is great. But yeah, Maria, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more,
Sure.
Where you're from, kind of your background, and just kind of give everyone sort of a look into where you were coming from when you got into UX Academy.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So like Will said, my name is Maria. I graduated from UX Academy last May, so a little less than a year ago. I'm based in San Francisco, and I currently work, as Will mentioned, for Designlab as a UX writer, and then I also do freelance product design on the side. Before UX Academy, I did not have a background in design at all. My degree is in political science from UC Santa Cruz. Go Banana Slugs. But then after that, I worked as a marketing manager for a healthcare nonprofit in San Francisco. And then I also worked for the state government as a field representative, doing like lots of constituent work, casework, stuff like that. So not design related at all.
Cool. And so how did you even like find out about Designlab, or how did you even find out about UX?
Yeah, so after working for about 3 years, both in nonprofit work and for the government, I wasn't feeling super fulfilled by my job. I met great people and I had great experiences, but I also really liked creativity. I like to do like art on the side, just kind of any kind of creativity I could fit into my schedule. And I wasn't feeling very creatively fulfilled at work. And I also didn't really feel like the work I was doing was moving very quickly, because in nonprofits, you run into the risk of like lack of funding, which really slows things down. And then if you're working for the government, you're very entangled in a much larger bureaucratic system. So it's very hard to get things done. So I felt like I was putting in a lot of work and not really getting to see like the fruits of any of the labor. And I really wanted to try something completely different. So being in San Francisco, there's a lot of tech events, a lot of design events. So knowing kind of that I liked technology and I liked creativity, I tried a few different things out. I went to a couple coding classes and quickly discovered that was not for me. But there are a lot of design events. So I went to a few local design workshops, heard some talks from current UX designers just about what their day-to-day was like. And it was just sort of like this holy grail moment where I was like, oh my God, that sounds so interesting. It's a combination of creativity and empathy and psychology and business, which were all things that I was interested in but didn't know how to combine. And then after I did a lot of research, I settled on UX Academy.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting. So your background, so really it was marketing, and you had done some work with government organizations, but it really wasn't anything really design related. Right. Yeah. Did you do any coursework in design at college?
No, I didn't do any. So my college did not have a design program at all. So I had zero design, I'd opened Photoshop and then been very intimidated and just closed it. So very little design experience.
I mean, it was the same for me when I started 2 years ago. I mean, I have a degree in history from a liberal arts college. I never took any design courses. Like you, I was very scared about Photoshop. Yeah. It's pretty complex.
So many buttons.
Yeah, there are a lot of buttons. So that's cool. So you didn't have any real kind of design experience before jumping into this?
No, none.
Yeah. Had you ever looked at any courses online, or kind of, really like tried to get in something before and then it not working? Or was this really kind of the first attempt?
So I'd done some online learning classes before when I decided I was going to be an engineer briefly. I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to code online. And that had been an interesting experience. And I really liked online learning. I like self-directed learning. And I'd taken online classes in college as well as in-person classes. And I really liked the self-directed nature of it. I liked that I could set my own schedule and kind of work at my own pace. So I was familiar with online learning, and I knew that it was a system that worked well for my study habits.
Yeah, cool. Now, do you feel like there was anything from your marketing background that did help, as you went through the course? And we'll touch on this more later, but I'm curious if you feel like anything kind of in your past roles.
Yeah, really, totally.
Yeah.
So the thing about marketing is like, it's a lot about trying to figure out like what people want and how to better serve the people that you're trying to market to, and how you create a product that will serve them and that they'll invest in. So when I was working as a marketing manager, I was doing a lot of, our audience was specifically doctors. So I did a lot of interviews with doctors. I developed kind of marketing personas based on who the doctors were, which is something that you always do in UX design too, because you really need to know who your user base is, and you need to know how to develop a product that fits that user base. And really, both as a marketing manager and when I was working for the government, it was a lot of work based on empathy and trying to understand people, trying to understand where they were coming from, how to solve their problems, or how to create something that would solve their problems for them. And any kind of like empathy-based work and knowledge about working with people and targeting something to a group of people is very foundational to UX design.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely observed too, just talking to so many students over the last 2 years and like talking to our alumni and kind of seeing their backgrounds. And I've talked to some of you all about this on the phone. And like I said, I'll touch on this more a little bit towards the end, but really, I mean, there are a variety of different backgrounds you could come from without even having to do with design necessarily that can still really carry forward. Marketing does happen to be one of those really powerful fields, I think, because like you said, you kind of already understand how to construct a product. You understand like the persuasion behind it or why you have to deliver information at a certain point. So, you know, I think like marketing is a really great place to transition from.
Yeah.
But there's a whole variety of other occupations, industries that I think share a lot of those skills.
Sure.
So, yeah. So when you actually got into the course, and I know this is a big question. So what was the kind of day-to-day like? So yeah, kind of walk us through, you know, sort of what were the circumstances like when you started to take the course? Like what was going on in your life? Were you working? And then, yeah, what was the day-to-day like actually being a student, going through the curriculum, going through the projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I took the course full-time, but I was also working part-time to kind of just pay the bills and make sure that I had some income coming in on the side. So I was working at a bookstore, just like kind of basic retail stuff during the day, and then doing pretty much most or all of my work in the evening. And so there was definitely a lot of need for scheduling and time management. I think one of the biggest selling points of UX Academy and something that I was really attracted to was that I could set my own hours and work at my own pace, which you obviously don't get in an in-person class. But I think the biggest thing I learned was that you do need to set a schedule for yourself and you do need to stick to it. That was definitely helpful for me in figuring out, you know, how do I get my coursework done? How do I manage my time? Was really, if you're going to say like I do my UX Academy coursework from like 5 to 9, consider that time as sacred as if you had to, you know, actually attend an in-person class where someone was taking attendance.
Yeah, definitely. So with the actual day-to-day, did you try to gate curriculum to one time, projects to one time, or did it feel better to kind of sort of go through the course kind of as an even flow and not really separate those two aspects?
So what I did that was really helpful, and one thing I really liked about UX Academy's interface was that they give you time estimates for everything. So every assignment you do, every project you do, they'll be like, this should take you about 45 minutes. This should take you about 3 hours. So I would go at the start of my week and figure out what coursework in total I needed to accomplish that week. And then I had like a physical planner, which I really recommend. I think it helps to see information visually like that. And I would box out the time, like this is going to take me about 45 minutes, so I'll do this for 45 minutes. And then just going module by module, assignment by assignment. And then also, obviously, with mentor sessions, that's sort of something you can't move once it's scheduled. So make sure that you've done everything you need to like lead up to your mentor session so that you're prepared for that.
Yeah. So I remember when I took the course, so I used Trello. And that was a suggestion by someone else on our team. So our director of operations, Maddie, she was a student in UX Academy and then was hired out from that. And so that was actually a couple of years ago. And she passed that tip on to me when I was taking the course. So, you know, I was using Trello and I did kind of the same thing. I would try to set time, sort of like estimated time frames for myself. You know, I'm going to get this reading done in 20 minutes. And that was also something for me. So I read quickly. That was my strength. I was a little slower with the visual design. So I would know that I could kind of get through the reading quickly and maybe, you know, sort of set smaller time increments, but then I'd give myself more time for the visual design exercises. And so it really didn't change very much, but like framing it in that way, I think, you know, really helped. So speaking of mentorship, so what was it kind of like working with your mentor and you know, what was the sort of cadence of the sessions? What did you find really valuable to talk about or you know, what caused or what created kind of the most beneficial mentor sessions for you?
Yeah, sure. So I loved my mentor. We met, because I was on the full-time track, we met twice a week. And usually what would happen was we'd go over the most recent work that I'd done. So if it was a first draft of something, maybe just like the structure of what I wanted a web page to look like before I'd added, you know, like color and typography to it, it would be a great opportunity for him to be like, okay, but are you sure you want this there? And kind of make sure that the bones were in place for me to flesh it out later and make it look okay. And then if there was any course readings or assignments that I had questions on, I could ask him some questions. It's also a really awesome opportunity too, because all of the mentors are working design professionals. So unlike a professor whose maybe job has been teaching for, 10, 20, 30 years. This is someone who's mentors on the side of their design day job. So they have a great sense of what the industry is doing, where it's headed, and they're a leader in their field. So they also know what new candidates should have. They do a lot of hiring. They know what junior designers need to have. So for me, what was great was even before I really got into the job search aspect, I would come to each mentor session with like a list of industry questions for him and be like, hey, should I learn to code? The answer is no, don't learn to code. Or like, should I learn motion design? Or does this look like something that I could present in an interview? And he could be like, here's why you should learn this, here's why you don't need to learn that right now, and here's why this either would or wouldn't work in an interview. He can really give you that real life working experience. It's going to make it a lot easier down the road when you're actually talking to hiring managers and talking to people who could give you a job.
Yeah. So who was your mentor that you had?
My mentor's name is Alan. He's based in Chicago, and I was based in San Francisco. So we never met in person because of the geographic distance, but I really felt like we developed a great relationship over the course. He was super helpful. He was definitely like strict on me in a lot of ways and make sure that my design was really like as good as it needed to be. But I also think that ended up with me having a really strong portfolio after, because he would make me go back and do these revisions and make sure that everything really looked like it should in a job interview. And he would have me do practice interview sessions with him. And this is something that a lot of mentors do. So I'd have to present to him the work that I'd done so far and ask like and defend my work. So it's like, I made this color for this reason, or I made this image like this shape because of this thought. And so you learn how to defend your design decisions. And then when you go into interviews, that's what people are going to ask you. They're going to ask you, what were your thoughts behind this? And once you've had an experience of doing that in a less high pressure situation, when you know how to structure an answer to that question, it makes the interview process so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to bring up. And that's something that I'll talk about like pretty explicitly in terms of, how do you really kind of leverage different tactics, different tips to kind of help you get that job. But, that aspect of defending your design decisions or phrased another way, being able to sell your designs, that's huge. That's huge. So that kind of brings me to another point where anyone who's been in an industry where you have to do that, I think that's an invaluable skill. And that's really something that, kind of anyone wants to have in any capacity. You want to have strong interpersonal skills, but especially being a designer, what makes a great product designer is someone who can empathize, who can really communicate with people well, who can really like elicit what the sort of needs are. But then on the other hand, it's like really defend what they're doing and show someone, actually kind of prove this is why I made these decisions. Was there anything in particular that Alan did, like number one thing that he did that was most impactful for you, or any kind of like exercise he would run you through, or just anything?
The mock interviews were the best practice ever, because he would kind of give me a heads up the session before, and he'd be like, okay, I'm going to let you run through your whole presentation, but I'm going to have like 20 questions for you after, and you're going to need to know how to answer them. And then on the next session, I'd present new work to him, and then he'd be like, I'm going to interrupt you and ask you a bunch of questions. So you learn how to interview with different types of people and answer different types of questions. So that was really useful. And then he also, for my portfolio stuff, he really went through all of my case studies with a fine-tooth comb in terms of editing, in terms of like, this paragraph's too long, a hiring manager isn't going to read this, you need to make it shorter, or this needs more visual elements. And just his real-world experience applied through teaching just made my work much better and made interviewing a lot easier, I think.
Yeah. So really going through that exercise of defending the work and just kind of having him sort of say, hey, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Like really questioning things. Yeah. That was like huge.
Totally. It's the best, if you think about it, it's like the closest you're going to get to a job interview before you're actually in that high pressure situation. So the more prepared you can possibly be going in, the easier time you're going to have.
Yeah. So kind of moving forward a little bit. So what was it like to actually work on your capstone projects and just creating your portfolio?
Yeah, so capstones are a lot of fun. So the first phase of UX Academy is all project work. You learn like design fundamentals, stuff like that. Then phase 2, so the second half of the course is 3 capstone projects that end up providing the foundation for your portfolio. And the capstones are a lot of fun. It's kind of your chance to actually synthesize everything you've learned thus far and turn it into a fully created product that you can then show off to people and really use. And so it was great. I would recommend, if possible, working with a local business for one of your capstones. I know some people who did that and they ended up working with like a local bike shop or a local coffee shop and getting to redesign their website or their app. And it's a great experience too, in working with a client and knowing what that's like. And then after you kind of have all of this work, you get to create a case study for your portfolio. And that's definitely worth, taking the extra time for and taking the extra effort to make sure the final images look great, that you're really proud of every single thing that's in there, because that's also the first thing that people are going to see when you job search. You have to show everyone your portfolio, and you have to be able to explain and defend and kind of celebrate everything in there. Yeah, that's a big point that I mention a lot, to a lot of you all on the phone about the portfolio. I mean, that is very explicitly an outcome of a course like this. And that's really your first tool to kind of get your foot in the door. When I used to do recruiting for UX, I actually really didn't know much about the field. I was just told like, hey, I have accounts I had to manage, and this was in a past role. And I had to look for candidates. And, I didn't realize this at the time, but if you think about kind of the recruiting cycle for design, an HR manager, a talent acquisition person, just a hiring manager, they might not have any design experience. And so if they take a look at a portfolio, they might just go based off of aesthetics, off of visuals. Right. And so if you can really make sure that first point, that first contact with someone is very impressive, it really stands out, that can kind of get you in the door with folks that might not have any design background, but they kind of see that and they think, oh, this is definitely kind of, who I want to talk to, who I want to kind of proceed with. So, cool. And so once you got done with your portfolio, then it was kind of time to move towards the job search. So what was it like to kind of get into the job search? So after I passed my portfolio review, I entered the career services portion of Designlab. So you have a whole additional curriculum that's all geared towards finding a job. And you also have a new career coach who's, you've kind of ended your relationship with your mentor at this point, and now you have sessions with your career coach who's been trained and is specifically there to help you figure out how to get a job. And that's another really helpful aspect to things. My coach kind of helped me figure out how to write a cover letter, what information to include, what my resume should look like, even how my resume should be laid out. And they also help you kind of keep track of all the jobs you're applying for, make sure that you're keeping your design skills sharp, even if you're not designing in the course every day. So how do you keep your design skills sharp while you're working or while you're job searching? And also a lot of mentors have connections at different companies too. So there's always possibilities for referrals or just connections to be made. So it's job searching is tough, but you definitely get additional support through career services. Yeah.
What was kind of unique about the design job search process compared to kind of everything else, right? So like your marketing roles, government roles in the past.
Yeah, so I'd never interviewed for a design job before, right? Because I didn't have a background in that. So I was used to kind of interviews being more just focused on questions, So like, what's your biggest strength? What's your biggest weakness? What would you do in this hypothetical situation? But when you walk into a design interview, they've already seen your portfolio, so they already know a lot about your work and about sort of your style and what you have done and what you've accomplished thus far. So you get asked a lot more specific questions about your actual experience and about your actual work, because they can turn to your capstone projects and ask you specific questions on that. And there also is an element of usually a whiteboard challenge or a design challenge. So it's either a take-home thing or they'll kind of give you some space in the conference room to do it. And they'll be like, I had to design a mobile game for someone, just some wireframes of it, where you design, how if we wanted to update our conference booking feature on our mobile app, redesign that process for us. And so there's a lot of kind of challenge aspects to it that are kind of stretch you creatively. And they're also pretty easy to prepare for too. Once you've done a couple different whiteboard challenges and design challenges, you can pretty much handle whatever is thrown at you, and your career coach can kind of give you some and then go over feedback with you, which was really helpful for me.
Yeah. So the exercises that Alan did with you definitely came in handy.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Because it simulated what that process was like, sort of having to answer a question on the fly and really kind of provide a solution to people right then. That's very cool. So was there anything kind of that was surprising about the job search at all? And you know, Maria's working with us and she's working as a UX copywriter. So it is a little bit of a different kind of focus to the role. And you know, we could touch on that here a little bit. So with her background in writing and marketing, you know, that kind of makes a good sort of transition into something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just speaking about the job search in general, was there anything really surprising about it?
Yeah, so touching on my background, so I loved UX design in general, but my other passion has always been for writing, and I was really looking for a way to combine design and writing. So I landed at Designlab, which is like a perfect opportunity to kind of combine my interest in design and keep my design skills sharp with a lot of writing, which I really enjoy, and then I do freelance design on the side as well. But I think the biggest thing that I learned from the job search that I would tell everybody applying for really any field, but especially if you're doing a career change, is just to apply for everything. I think when you start to look at job postings, you'll see they want 3 years of experience or 1 to 2 years of experience, and you're like, oh, I have like 6 months of experience. But I think what you have to really remember is that those requirements are really a wish list that the employer provides. And it's pretty, I got interviews at places that ask for 3 to 5 years of experience just because they want other skills more. They care less about years of experience, I think, especially in creative fields, and much more about your ability to produce the work that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing across tech as an industry. It really is more skills based. You know, it's, can you display the right, you know, acumen? Can you really display that you know what you're doing with the task that's going to be set out in front of you?
Yeah.
You know, we've seen that confirmed through things, you know, big companies like Apple recently removing the college degree requirement for any job applications. I get that question a lot sometimes. People say, do I have to have a degree, or is it going to be bad if I don't have that 4-year background? And really, it is all about kind of display of skill. You know, we see that coming through. I mean, you know, our student Nia, who got that year-long contract with National Geographic. I mean, I talk about that a lot because it's a cool company. It's National Geographic. But at the same time, you know, that job description asked for 5 years of experience. Nia just did not have that, but she was able to really showcase her passion for both what the company wanted, what the company was about, and then also just showing, hey, I can actually do this role. You know, I'm trained, I understand everything. So, well, that kind of brings me to my last point here, and then we'll jump into some questions here, because I know that you all have been sharing those here. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, and this is also something that comes up a lot with calls, I've spoken to some of you all about this, but this aspect of how do you leverage your past experience? And I think what I've learned over time, working with students over the last 2 years, talking to alumni, is really that it comes down to, what's the story that you tell? What's the narrative about why you decided to get into design? And also, what is it about your past experience that you can pull forward? So some of that might not be as natural of a connection. So if you worked as a graphic designer for 10 years, moving into product, that's a pretty natural transition. You can see that. You've already got those visual design skills. But maybe something like marketing, someone might look at that and say, well, what does that have to do with design? Well, you know, we kind of covered the sort of empathetic work that you're doing, really focusing in on how do you showcase something, how do you construct a product, even if it's a brochure or even if it's like a landing page. But even other opportunities, I think, can really present themselves in a way that, you know, if you are aware of that going into the job search process, that can really pull you forward. So if you've been a pharmacist for 10 years, that doesn't have a lot to do with design on the surface. But a pharmacist is someone who practices very technically heavy work. It's complex, but also there's got to be some process involved in that work on a day-to-day basis. You don't want to give people the wrong medicine. You want to make sure that you're prescribing or showcasing, you know, kind of the right qualities about something. So even in that respect, there is a lot of wealth and there is a lot of great stuff with those 10 years of pharmacy. So what I tell people a lot is, even if you're going to be a new UX designer, don't forget about your past history. You're not new to work. And that's also something else that's really big, because for a lot of our students, we see a lot of folks that are in their mid-late 20s, early mid-30s or beyond. And we see a lot of people that have already worked in other careers, other industries. That work experience is still valuable. Another way you could think about it is, if you're strategic about that job search process, let's say you're that pharmacist, well, then you apply to go work on a product that pharmacists would use. And I think that's a really smart way to approach it, because you can already claim, I'm your ideal user. I have that 10 years of experience. So really, whatever it is that you might be doing, this is something that you can pull forward. It's just, you have to make that connection in the first place, and then feel confident about saying that. Again, in tech, I think it's really nice that it is more skills based. It's really, what can you do? And so having like a 4-year graphic design degree from RISD or something, it's not as necessary, because we want people who have a variety of backgrounds, who have a variety of experiences. I would argue that that would make you a more empathetic person, so it allows you to connect with people more. The other point I want to touch on, and then we'll jump into some questions, is just the kind of structure of the narrative that you're telling, and the way you can kind of make that come out, not just through the words that you're saying, not just through kind of how do you pitch yourself in the interview, but it's also the actual portfolio itself.
Definitely.
And so I think if you have an opportunity to really kind of point yourself in the right direction, whether that's maybe you have a dream to work for Spotify, so you really love music streaming services. Well, could you choose products, or could you create capstones that really focus on features that are important to that industry, or that are important to music apps, entertainment apps, products that work in that space? And so if you can come in with a portfolio that backs up your narrative, I think that's going to be a huge step forward, because then the employer, right, even before they meet you, they see that asset. They see, oh, here's a story here that we can tell from all of these different projects. So I can definitely follow up with anyone. If you guys are ever curious about any of these things that we're talking about, or you want to hear more from, Maria or any one of our alums, you can always reach out to us. Again, you can email me directly, and you can also request to hop on another call with us. So if we have covered anything and you want to learn more, you want to go more in depth, we're happy to do that. So I think what we're going to do now is turn to a couple of questions. And so we're going to try to go through some of these here. And we're going to look here at some of the highest upvoted ones. Cool. Okay. So we'll try to get through as many of these as possible. But then again, if for some reason we're not able to get through all of these here, which we probably won't get through all of them.
A lot of good questions.
Yeah. But we can definitely follow up with you all through email or through a call. So, rest assured, you can definitely get some answers. So the first question is, how long does it take on average for graduates in UX Academy to get a job? So really, that kind of depends on the market. And that's one of the biggest factors that I tell people. So, I mean, to be honest, for somewhere like San Francisco, because that market is very, very big, you gain the benefit of having a ton of jobs, but there is also a lot of competition.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so that's not something I shy away from in explaining to people. And so accurately, 4 to 6 months in a place like San Francisco. You could also see markets like New York, like Toronto, for instance. These are also big tech markets, super premium markets is what I would call them. And so again, the job search can be fairly long. You can accelerate that though by doing some of those things that I talked about. And so really, if you can kind of create that good narrative, if you can really pitch yourself well in that interview process, I think those are really big keys to kind of accelerate things. Is there anything that you kind of came across that you felt like was a tip like that really helped you kind of push things along, or networking or anything?
Yeah,
like that?
I mean, job search is tough. I think it's tough in any field, in any industry. And I think what helped me the most was having the benefit or lack of benefit of living in San Francisco. One of the pros was that there was a lot of networking opportunities for me. And there was a lot of support from other Designlab students and also from local design interest groups. So there's a group called Hexagon. They have chapters in, I think, pretty much every major city around the world, or a lot of them anyway, which is just for women in UX design. So I joined that, and I got a mentor through that who got me some job interviews. And there's just lots of different communities of design. It's a very supportive space. It's a lot of people who, it's like they genuinely want to help you get a job, or they genuinely want to put you in touch with someone who can. So I think even I've cold reached out to people on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I see you work at Airbnb. Could we get coffee and talk about that? And they're down to get coffee and talk about it. It's really interesting. Like people, it's very open. People love to share. People give me free design books just for like showing up at something because they're like, do you want this? And cleaning out my library. So it's a great supportive community. Even in cities where there's less of a tech culture, there's always a design culture to some extent. And I think finding those pockets will help you get a job and will also kind of just help you stay involved in the design community and stay up on trends and make you happier too.
Yeah. So I think keying in on good networking groups early on can definitely accelerate things. And not to leave kind of the rest of sort of the cities we see students from out of this. So smaller markets, so places like Chicago, Austin, Seattle, those places, so they still have a good tech scene. It's still a large market, but there might be a little less competition. And so that can result in, I think, a 2 to 4 month timeline. So this is just based on kind of what we've seen with people. And then you can kind of make comparisons with sort of similar markets. I personally live in a pretty small city. I live in Kentucky. It's not necessarily a tech hub. And so if I were looking for a product design job where I live personally, that would be a little tough because that market just doesn't support a lot of those roles. But even kind of other regional cities around that area, though, as we start to get a little bit bigger, you know, Nashville, Charlotte, Durham, even places like that, you could still find enough of a job or enough of a kind of a community of jobs that are available. And so again, you know, maybe 2 to 4 months is what we'll see. And so, yeah, if I had to recommend anything to accelerate that, if you can get clued in on networking events, and like Maria said, if you can cold email people, or if you feel comfortable with even outreach like that, that can be a huge step for a lot of people. And I found that a lot of people are pretty willing to help.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Okay, so let's see, the second question here. So Peggy asked, what proportion of your knowledge and skills in UX and UI came from UX Academy and which came from additional learning or studying on your own? How would you suggest going about structuring supplemental learning?
That's a really good question. I think UX Academy provides a great foundation of skills. Like it really will prepare you for a junior level position in that you will learn all of the essential visual skills, research skills, information skills that you need to get a job. But I think design, because it's an industry that moves so quickly, it's one of those industries where you never stop learning. So I would say the majority of my skills were informed by Designlab, and I made it a priority after I finished to keep improving those skills and keep adding new skills to my repertoire. So there's another great thing about design being so open is that there's tons of resources available. So I'm happy to share some. Pablo Stanley's YouTube channel, he's great. So he does Sketch Together was his main thing. So different sketch tutorials. He did one on Principle, which is all motion design, which is a great skill to add to your portfolio kind of after you've learned some basics. He works for Envision now, so he does a lot of Envision tutorials, stuff like that. And there's so many resources, lots of LinkedIn learning videos touch on visual design stuff, different tools you can learn. So really, I never had to pay for additional learning because there is so much additional stuff online. Knowing where to look for it is the biggest hurdle probably, and I'm happy to like share those resources after or through Will. But you know, once you find them, it's great. And then in terms of structuring it, since I'd already kind of figured out I was a very structured learner and I really needed to set aside time. You have a lot more free time after you finish the program, right? Because all of that time was still like blanked out in my schedule. So I just tried to think of it as an additional course that I was taking. But you know, I was still using that same time to learn. Yeah.
Do you feel like though that the actual process that was taught in UX Academy, so everything from kind of research all the way to UI and then doing the capstones themselves, I mean, do you feel like that curriculum and projects, that experience itself was a good enough foundation to get you to where you felt comfortable saying, yes, I could be a junior designer?
Yeah, totally. So UX Academy covers every aspect of a product design process. So everything that you learn is going to factor into a potential job. I think everything else is just sort of icing, you know, other things you can learn to kind of set yourself apart. But all the foundational stuff that you learn in UX Academy will be the bread and butter of your future product design position.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So Justin asked, so why Designlab versus the competition? GA, Springboard, Block, Career Foundry. Yeah, so with this question, and I've talked to a lot of you all, I guess, about this already, but so whenever a student asks me this question, I always kind of break it down to really 3 things. So the first thing is, and this is entirely subjective, it's just how you feel. I found out about Designlab from a woman named Karen Chang from her blog post, which Maria actually knows Karen in real life.
Yes, we watched The Bachelor together.
But she wrote a big, long blog post about how to teach yourself design. And I wanted to learn design 2 years ago. So I tried her method. I bought like all these books, and it just was hard. I had no mentor. In design, you have to have objective feedback to really help you grow. And so I remember when I found Designlab, I found it through that blog post. She mentions it in like 1 sentence up at the top. So I clicked on it, I checked it out. I have a background in recruiting for UX, so I was familiar with some of the providers, but I never heard of Designlab. And honestly, I just felt a little bit more comfortable. It felt like a startup to me. It felt a little bit more warm, personal. You know, that's what I always try to intend to do when I talk to people on the phone. That's kind of what our company is about now, actually working here. But that was something I picked up at the beginning. Now, some people might want something that might feel like a little bit of a different experience. I'll call it like more of an enterprise experience, like a big company experience. And that's okay too. I think there are just different, you know, kinds of settings for different people. So that's the first thing, entirely subjective. The other 2 things, though, would really come down to, I think, our portfolios. So I think with our students, number 1, because the curriculum focuses on everything in the product design process, it doesn't limit you, which is really important because your first role will likely be a junior role that has you occupying that generalist you know, sort of a place on the spectrum. And so you are going to be doing a little bit of everything. It's pretty hard for someone to specialize immediately out of the gate. I could find a UX researcher who might not have design experience, but they'd have 30 years of academic research experience and they're a PhD holder. So that's kind of the corollary. But otherwise, as a generalist, it's important you have all those skills. So we teach that through the curriculum, but then that's reinforced through the portfolio. So every single one of your capstones, for instance, I mean, you have to show every research asset.
Yeah, end to end.
Yeah,
for sure.
Always UI at the end. And so that's a gap for some students. Certain schools might have them focus on one end of the other. And the problem is like your UI might look really solid, but you're missing all the research assets. You might not even know how to do it. Or vice versa, your research assets look strong, but your UI might be in black and white. And so really there was no skill set there. So I think our portfolios are really strong. I think students also pay attention to how they're written. You have to have good answers, kind of a good narrative with your actual case studies. Graphic design, you can kind of throw the work up and it speaks for itself, but here it's a little different. So I think all of that for our students is really strong. We also try to do custom capstones or allow students freedom in picking which products they want to work with. It's not like they have to do XYZ because portfolio replication is a big issue in the industry. And so if you want to, you know, judge for yourself, this is definitely a method that I teach on the phone. Go to LinkedIn. You can type in any number of these schools' names. You could pair it with a market. So you could type in Career Foundry, New York, Designlab, San Francisco, and you'll pull up people's profiles. Typically, if you go into them in the bio section up at the top, you'll see a link to their portfolio. So you can just start checking out portfolios yourself. If you don't see it listed, Google their name and then just say UX design portfolio, or Google their name and just do portfolio. Chances are you'll find it. So you can kind of look, see for yourself, and really take, you know, kind of a look at what some of the other portfolios are coming out. And again, I mean, I think that's a huge point for people because it really is that first look that someone's going to get at you as a candidate. The other thing that I would mention about this too is just our mentorship. I think our mentor community is really, really strong. The fact that we have people like Cowan, who's going to ask you a million questions that might seem frustrating at the time, but
it pushes you.
It pushes you. And so you want to have someone who can really be a good coach to you, not just someone who is going to be nice with all of their feedback. And so in an appropriate way. And I think with us, so any UX Academy mentor has to successfully prove that they can mentor in our short courses first. So we have a whole nother set of products where they're month-long courses. And if anyone wants to teach in UX Academy, they have to go through that process first. Typically, they have to go through at least 6 months of successful mentoring there. We look at reviews. We also vet for experience as well. But we have this system already built in where people do have to prove themselves before they're allowed to even touch UX Academy. And so with UX Academy, you've already got this system built in where people have worked with students successfully, and they also have that experience coming in where they can accurately teach these principles of product design. So that's something else that I would say that really separates us. I think our mentor quality is huge. We've got people like Lauren Connolly, who used to work at Yelp and now works at Spotify in New York. We've got Seb, a senior product designer at Squarespace. We've also got, Michael Brooks Jr., who started his own company. So he's a chief product officer for his own app now. So we've got a variety of people. So it's not just enterprise experience. It's not just kind of startup experience. It could be people in the middle, people who are doing their own product, people that are in early stage startups. So it's kind of a variety. But no matter what, you're always going to get someone that's proven themselves and that has shown success before they move into it. So, and by the way, Justin, like if you have any other questions kind of on that, you can definitely reach out to me. I can chat more. So, all right. So let's see how many more we can answer here. All right. So Paul asks, what should be the salary expectations or range of UX Academy graduates? So across the board, when we look at all of the markets that we see our students going in, and we look at an average, it's about 70,000. Now that number could go up for a place like San Francisco.
It's definitely higher in San Francisco.
So in San Francisco, definitely like in the
80s to 90s.
80s to 90s, yeah. And so in New York City, that could also happen because again, that market's very big. It's a lot more premium of a market. But 70 is probably where we would see people starting in also markets like Seattle, like Austin, Chicago. And then if you were in kind of a smaller market, Cleveland, Ohio, let's say, or Durham, North Carolina, that's where you might see the rates drop a little bit, maybe into the 60s. And then it might scale down a little bit more. So if you did find a product design job in a small town, you might see it kind of dip into the lower 60s or high 50s. Speaking as someone who lives in a small college town in Lexington, so we've got a couple 100,000 people. We've got startups. We've got a couple of enterprise type companies that have been planted there for a while. So I would see probably the high 50s or 60, 61, 62 is kind of that rate. So, all right. So our next question here. So what was it like getting your first UX job without work experience? Most of the openings out there require experience. So I think we kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking about sort of the narrative that you tell and kind of your ability to showcase your skills. Do you have anything else that you think really kind of assists with that? Or any other kind of tips that could help someone sort of overcome that? And I'm happy to also kind of provide some answers here. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it is tough, right? Getting a job in any industry is tough. And when you're changing careers, it's obviously like a whole new ball game. I think I mentioned this earlier, but not letting you mentioned that a lot of openings require experience. Don't let that stop you for applying to things. A lot of places aren't as focused on experience as they are on skills. And I would also say that if you can, I was surprised at how many connections I ended up having. I don't know a lot of people who work in tech, but I know a lot of people who know people who work in tech. And I think you can be very surprised by the strength of your own network in a lot of ways and figuring out, maybe this is an opening, maybe this is a lead, and just being very persistent in pursuing opportunities too. So, use your personal connections when you have them. And if you don't have any, just after you apply for a job, contact the hiring manager on LinkedIn and express your interest in the position. Take those extra steps that no one's going to tell you to take, and that might feel like you might be worried about bugging them or something. But if they're looking through a stack of applications and you've just messaged them, they're going to remember your name, and your resume might end up in a different stack. Or they're going to remember that you expressed additional interest. And so maybe this isn't just like a throwaway job you applied for, but it's something you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And if you can demonstrate that passion and that persistence, they also can tell that you're going to be a better employee. So use skills like that maybe don't come super naturally, but once you're in the habit of doing it, I think your success rate will be so much higher.
Yeah, I really think leveraging past experience, it comes into play here. I mean, if you think about traditional recruiting channels for companies, and I am speaking pretty largely about like the US, so that I will say that. If you're recruiting from a traditional design program, you're pulling people that are 21, 22, and they don't have any experience. They might have had 4 years of design education. They might have built a portfolio, but they don't have that real world experience. And so if you can really bring that to the table and say, hey, I've already got this, and I added these skills on top, you have to look at it all together. It's not, I'm just a new designer now and that's it. I got no design experience. I'm just brand new. You have to use what you've already done to your advantage. I also think there could be a couple of things you can actually do in the interview process that can really shift the kind of frame a little bit. So one thing that I've heard students talk about, and this is just a way you can pitch your work, but instead of just saying like, hey, here's a custom project that I worked on. I'm passionate about enabling people to message each other across the world, so that's it. So that could be one way to frame it, but another way to frame it is, so I have always had friends all across the world, and I've always wanted to stay in touch. And something that's important to me is making sure that I can stay in touch with them in the easiest way possible. So I created this product thinking this could actually be something I could work on later on in life because I'm so passionate about it. So I know I did this for a project, but this is something that I actually would love to see come to life. So that's not really changing too much. It's just you're presenting it in a different way. But I've seen from alumni that that's a really positive way to frame things for an employer because it shows you have initiative. Also, with your projects in your portfolio, if you pick things that you are really passionate about, that comes out. It's not just, definitely, I did this, it's a banking app, banking's cool. It's, I chose this app because I love this feature, I love this feature, I use it every single day. I would love to work for this company one day. My hope was that I did this case study so that if I got an interview for them, I could show them this work. Right. That's a completely different way to frame things, but it's a much more powerful way to present your work to someone to actually show them, hey, this is something I care about. It's not just I made the switch. It's not just I wanted to become a designer. I wanted to become a designer for a reason, and here's why. So I know that we're actually a little bit over here. So we originally wanted this to be about 45 minutes. And so we're getting a little bit over now. And I think with our schedule here, we're actually going to have to go ahead and head off. But I know that we've got some more questions here. And so what we can do, so I can look through these. And since I've talked to a lot of you all, I can actually just reach back out to try to help answer some of these extra questions. We can also get some of those resources out that Maria mentioned about the different networking groups, the different additional education outlets that you can kind of look at, or free resources. So we can definitely get some of these other things addressed here.
Yeah. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn too. I think we'll link to my portfolio in an email, which links in turn to my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer more individualized questions or just provide more about my personal experience and what I got out of the program, stuff like that. Yeah.
And if some of you all have not talked to me before, if you set up a call through the website, I'd be the person that's taking it. So definitely happy to chat with you. I'm also happy to go more in depth with your background. You can tell me kind of what you're looking for, and I'm happy to advise. I love to tell people that this could be a good direction, but I'm also happy to help people find out if this is not right for them, because we want people who are really honestly and truly in love with design to move forward. So I'm always happy to help offer that advice. And also for those of you who are maybe kind of on the line, you still have an invite for a UX Academy or a course coming up. If you do have any other questions, you can certainly reach out. We have seen a much higher influx of students. This is kind of the highest we've seen our numbers this early coming into an upcoming cohort. So our next available cohort is April 15th. You can still apply to that. We still have spots, but I am starting to think that we might have to cap at capacity just because of mentors and making sure we have enough people to kind of pair with students successfully. So there's a chance we might have to start moving people to May. So if that's something that you're still considering, or it's something that you're still kind of thinking about, If I can provide any answers to kind of help out with that, please reach out and let me know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would suggest kind of reserving your spots soon. Even cohorts like May and June are going to start to get bigger, and the summer is traditionally a bigger time for us. I think it fits with a lot of people's schedules. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Maria for giving us all these great tips and kind of talking about your own experience.
Yeah.
Again, if you guys have any follow-ups, please reach out to me directly. You can just say, hey, Will, reach out to hello@trydesignlab.com. I'll try to do some outreach as well. And we'll try to do another one of these soon so that way we can answer more questions. But yeah, let us know if there's anything else that you all would like to see in a future webinar. Feel free to give us that feedback. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you all later.
Bye.